myths out of your diet. There's more to fat than BMI. You can't run away from those calories. The truth about fat has been stretched thin, so it's time to adapt a new perspective. What really helps excess weight?
In good shape. In 30 minutes on DW. Enter the conflict zone with Tim Sebastian.
A Chinese balloon flying high over America has led to the cancellation of high-level talks between Beijing and Washington. My guest in Beijing is Senior Colonel Zhu Bo, expert on Chinese security and strategy. Well, apart from the balloon, there are plenty of other irritants that Washington wanted to discuss. What will happen next?
Conflict Zone. In 90 minutes on DW. Sometimes a seed is all you need to allow big ideas to grow. We're bringing environmental conservation to life with Learning Packs by Global Ideas. We will show you how climate change and environmental conservation is taking shape around the world and how we can all make a difference. Knowledge grows through sharing. Download it now for free.
Hello guys, this is the 77%, the platform for Africa's youth to debate issues and share ideas.
You know, on this channel, we are not afraid to touch on delicate topics.
The young people clearly have the solutions.
The future belongs to you.
The 77%, every weekend on DW.
How can journalism help us in overcoming divisions? Save the date for the DW Global Media Forum 2023 in Bonn, Germany. An increasingly fragmented world with a growing number of voices digitally amplified. We see where this clutter can lead. What we really need: overcoming divisions and a vision for tomorrow's journalism. Save the date and join us for this discussion at the 16th edition of DW's Global Media Forum.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. More than 20,000 people have been killed in the devastating earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has defended his government's response, saying it's impossible to prepare for a disaster on this scale. Hopes of finding more survivors are fading. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has renewed his appeal for Ukraine to be allowed to join the European Union. He told EU leaders meeting in Brussels that Europe will only be at peace once Russia is defeated and Ukraine becomes a full member of the bloc. The Oscar and Grammy Award-winning American composer Burt Bacharach has died at age 94. He was one of the most prolific authors in music history. Bacharach produced dozens of hits, including Walk On By, I Say a Little Prayer, and Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. This is DW News from Berlin. You can find much more news on our website, dw.com.
After stops in London and in Paris on Wednesday, Ukraine's President Zelensky stopped in Brussels today. His message: we want to join the European Union and we need more weapons. Well, he may need even more. Elon Musk's company, SpaceX, is now restricting use of its Starlink satellite service to Ukraine's military, saying that Starlink was never meant to be weaponized. Now, Starlink has been a lifesaver for Ukraine's military. Without it, how can Ukraine defend itself against Russia? I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. This is The Day.
Long-term peace in Europe will be established only when Ukraine wins and becomes a member of the EU and NATO.
Your fight is a fight for independence, for democracy, for free Europe.
The coming weeks and months will probably be decisive.
I'm very grateful to hear from the European states who are willing to provide us with the necessary weapons, including warplanes.
We all heard the urgency of your call to support Ukraine now.
Today, a free Europe cannot be imagined without a free Ukraine.
Also coming up, the United States views China as the only rival with the intent and means to reshape the international order. Washington's latest proof, the balloons.
The irresponsible act put on full display what we've long recognized, that the PRC has become more repressive at home and more aggressive abroad.
To our viewers watching on PBS in the United States and to all of you around the world, welcome. We begin the day with the Ukrainian military's wish list for the West, a list that may have gotten a little bit longer. For months, Ukraine's president has sent request after request to his Western allies for heavy weapons, and his persistence appears to be paying off. The U.S. and Europe have agreed to send battle tanks to Ukraine. And now President Zelensky is pushing for fighter jets. On Wednesday, he spoke to UK lawmakers in London, thanking them in advance for shipments of fighter planes that no country has approved yet. In fact, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has already ruled out sending any planes to Ukraine. That said, Germany's U-turn on sending battle tanks shows that positions and policies, they can be changed. So today, President Zelensky, he took his request to Brussels and to the European Union, and this is part of what he heard.
The delivery of military capability is not a decision taken at EU level of the institutions, but a sovereign decision of the member states. Of course, there's a strong coordination, and you have seen the living proof of delivery of military capabilities. But everything else is done and coordinated at the European level.
I'm very grateful to hear from the European states who are willing to provide us with the necessary weapons, including warplanes. And now I will have a series of bilateral meetings where we will pay the necessary attention to the combat aviation. So we're now continuing our work here in Brussels.
Yeah, now to President Zelensky's wish list for his military that may suddenly be longer. Battle tanks, fighter jets, and now perhaps also internet and communication satellites. On Wednesday, Elon Musk's company SpaceX said that it is curbing use of its Starlink satellite communication service by the Ukrainian military. Apparently, Ukraine's use of Starlink to guide drone attacks against Russian forces is a no-go. The question is, why now? SpaceX sent thousands of Starlink terminals to Ukraine last year to provide internet communication. Now the company is saying that Starlink was, quote, never meant to be weaponized, and it's taken steps to limit its use with drones. Starlink relies on a network of satellites in low orbit around the Earth to provide wireless communication. Well, the Ukrainian government in Kyiv has condemned the decision by SpaceX, accusing the company of ignoring Ukraine's right to self-defense. For more now, I'm joined from Kharkiv in Ukraine by Dmytro Zhlutenko. He's founder of the Ukrainian military charity Zygaz-Pol, which supplies drones and other high-tech equipment to the Ukrainian military. Dmytro, it's good to have you with us tonight. I want to pull up something that your organization posted on Twitter earlier today. These are photos showing Starlink terminals and charging stations delivered to Ukrainian soldiers. And you tweeted that the equipment was well received by the boys. Let me ask you, will these soldiers, will they be able to use this equipment the way they want to now that SpaceX has announced plans to limit and maybe even block access?
All right, thrilled to be here, and I'm actually on the mission to deliver some of these Starlinks to the front lines in Donetsk region now, and I'm just having an overnight stop here in Kharkiv. So tomorrow I'll be downrange and I'll be setting up those Starlinks, and they will be able to work correctly as intended, as supposed to be, as it was before. Given that the statement by the SpaceX president, it was only referring to putting Starlinks into unmanned aerial vehicles, to mount Starlink into them to control those drones from Starlink, having Starlink as a communication for the control plane. But it has nothing to do with all of the other use cases, such as communication, such as streaming the data from the drone, like live streams, etc. So they have no problem with that, I suppose.
Well, I mean, what have you heard? Have you heard any reaction from soldiers? Because it is true what you're saying. They'll still be able to use Starlink for communications, but Starlink has said explicitly the technology cannot be used to launch any attacks against another power, against Russia. So that means they can't use Starlink to coordinate their drones for any type of offensive act against Russia.
So I think a few important things to highlight here is we just got to start with Ukraine is defending itself, and according to any international law, Ukraine is free to strike any target in Ukraine for the purposes of defending our country. So Ukraine only uses Starlink in defense purposes. Whatever that action would be, it would be in defense purposes. And who is the real aggressor here is only Russia, who is, if Russia withdraw their troops, the war would be over. But what they really said, the president of SpaceX, is they are okay with having Ukrainian military use the Starlink, this great piece of technology for communication. And actually, the communication is has really enormous amount of use cases in Russo-Ukrainian war, since most of the communication methods that you would normally use in the war are either destroyed or being jammed by Russian radio electronic warfare, or just being disabled by Russian electronic warfare.
Yeah, Dybka, what do you make though of this decision from SpaceX regarding Starlink? I mean, it seems to have basically come out of nowhere, and the Ukrainian military, they've been using Starlink now, in this war. We're almost a year into this war, and now suddenly this announcement.
I wouldn't say it's a sudden announcement. So I think Starlink, they play Russian propaganda card on the whole world, and this is actually isn't the first case I am tasked with giving the interview on this topic of commenting over some of the SpaceX actions. It was very huge in October, I think, when Elon Musk said he's not into funding Starlink for Ukraine because this is so expensive, etc., which was not the case at the time. And I think this exact case is very related to what head of Russian delegation to United Nations said on 31st of January this year. And he, I think, raged on whole world, saying it's very unfair to give Western satellite capabilities to Ukraine to its defense. He says it's unfair that Ukraine is able to defend itself, but in his mind, it's absolutely fair to launch an offensive into Ukraine, kill our people, rape our people, destroy our cities, etc.
Dybka, let me ask you this. So do you trust Elon Musk? Do you trust SpaceX? I mean, this change, it does not help the Ukrainian military.
Absolutely, it wouldn't be of any help, but so far they are covering a very specific use case. And as long as they are not tackling the main communication channels from Starlink, it's not that bad. But obviously, the company itself, they made a lot of public statements that are literally Russian propaganda, and Elon Musk has a long history of being pretty much affiliated with exactly Russian propaganda.
Yeah, that's
so I wouldn't say that I trust him or the company itself, but at the same time, the technology is crucial.
Okay.
But in our case, I think that it would be painful, very painful to lose it, but Ukrainians would figure everything out anyway. With or without Starlinks, Ukraine is determined to win, and this is the only option.
Dymcho Shlutenko, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and helping us understand, too, the impact of this decision on the military in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you.
U.S. President Joe Biden says that the shooting down of a suspected Chinese spy balloon has not soured relations between the two countries. The Pentagon says that the balloon was part of a large surveillance program that China has been conducting for several years, affecting countries across 5 continents. China says the craft was just a weather balloon.
These are the soggy remains of what is alleged to be a powerful Chinese spy craft. US defence teams here pulling the remnants from the sea off the South Carolina coast for further inspection. And the Pentagon doesn't believe this balloon was an isolated incident. US and NATO officials have met to discuss what comes next.
China engaged in this irresponsible action, a violation of our sovereignty and territorial integrity and international law. And as we've noted as well, we're not alone in this. Countries across 5 continents have also had surveillance balloons overfly their territory, which is why we're sharing this information with others.
We have also seen increased Chinese intelligence activities in Europe. Again, different platforms. They use satellites, they use cyber, and as we've seen over the United States, also balloons.
The discovery of the balloon and its subsequent shooting down have worsened Washington's already tense relations with China. The US has briefed 40 countries on the situation, with Australia responding by pulling Chinese-made security cameras from some government buildings, like this war memorial, to ensure that they are completely secure. China insists the balloon was simply monitoring the weather before veering off course.
It is unacceptable for the US to attack China's civilian airships, and it is irresponsible. Sensationalizing the so-called China threat doesn't help improve bilateral trust, nor does it make the US more secure.
As the United States mops up from the balloon fallout, President Joe Biden is stressing relations between the two countries have not taken a hit. Amid growing global tensions, the White House seemingly still hopeful of salvaging ties with Beijing.
Japan and the Philippines have agreed on a sharp boost to their defense ties. The deal will start by allowing Japanese troops to join training exercises to respond to natural disasters and other humanitarian emergencies in the Philippines. It follows an agreement allowing the United States more access to Philippine military bases to help keep Chinese territorial ambitions in check. Now, the deal was signed in Tokyo between Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and the visiting Filipino President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. They will aim to expand the transfer of defense equipment and technology to the Philippines and to strengthen trilateral cooperation with the United States. All right, I want to tie that development in with the balloon story now. And to do that, I'm joined by Oriana Skylar Mastro, a security policy analyst and fellow at Stanford University in California. She's also with the American Enterprise Institute. It's good to have you with us. My first question about the balloons. The U.S. State Department now says that China operates a fleet of these spy balloons and that they've been hovering over 5 continents. How is it that this operation apparently went unnoticed until now?
Well, I think we can generally state that there are a lot of things that are going on in international relations, in particular in the military realm between countries like China and the United States, that is not available for public consumption. And these are very sensitive programs. Surveillance and reconnaissance of other countries is not something that is openly revealed by a country like China. And for various reasons, the United States, probably to try to counter some of these capabilities, also not to cause diplomatic incidents, doesn't reveal them to the public either. And so for those reasons, it's very likely that these two countries are engaged in this type of behavior behind the scenes.
Do you think we would not even be having this conversation had the balloon not have been seen over Montana last week, by people?
I can only speculate, but I think that is right. There's definitely a public discourse aspect of this. The people who work on U.S.-China relations are used to this idea of competition between the two sides. The fact that the Chinese military has been preparing actively to fight a war against the United States for 25 years. None of this is shocking to people who look at this every day. But of course, the injection of public discourse into this, that the American public are realizing in a more visceral fashion that China could potentially be a threat, definitely impacts what the U.S. government's going to do.
But what's your reaction, or maybe I should ask you, how surprised are you by the level of prominence, attention that's been given to this balloon? I mean, if we think about other Chinese factors in the West, TikTok, for example, TikTok is on the phone of practically every young person in the United States, but you don't see the same outrage over that you're seeing over this balloon.
Well, absolutely. This is exactly the point. I was quite surprised that it has become such a media sensation. I'm working on a book right now about how China competes, and I can go for hundreds and hundreds of pages, and I do, about the various ways that China is not only challenging the security of the United States and its allies, but the international system as a whole. It's really quite striking how many of these stories go underreported. For example, the amount of police forces around the world that the Chinese train. This is something that's impacting the security of countries around the world, in addition to the fact that it gives China some influence. But these aren't things that we have statistics on or that's widely reported because it's not in the public eye.
We understand that the United States used a U-2 spy plane to get a closer look at this balloon before the balloon was shot down. Is the use of balloons and U-2 planes anachronistic given the high tech that is available now in the 21st century?
There are upsides and downsides to every type of platform, every technology. For example, I remember first learning about North Korean capabilities and that they still have some aircraft that are made out of wood. Of course, these are very small and they can't maneuver, but they also don't show up on radar, right? So when you have technological advances, it also means that certain types of capabilities are more easily tracked, monitored, and targeted. And also there's less deniability. Obviously, we know this is a surveillance craft, but China can continue to say it's a weather balloon. That would be very hard to say about a very obvious military platform.
And let me just ask you, before we run out of time, the spy balloon story, it's emerged just as the U.S. is forging stronger ties, security ties across Asia, the Asia-Pacific region. How does today's deal between the Philippines and Japan, how does that tie into this?
I think what's very interesting is China's response to this whole scenario. We're looking at a China that's responding like they did 20 years ago, as if none of us really understand that they prefer deniability, that they like to spin propaganda. No one believes this is a weather balloon. But it really highlights the fact that China continues to blame the deterioration of their security environment on outside factors and have not taken a look at their own behavior and their own policies. As they continue to do so, they're likely to do things that other countries find threatening and push them closer and closer together and with the United States.
Oriana Skylar Mastro with Stanford University in California and with the American Enterprise Institute. We appreciate your time. Valuable insights tonight. A fascinating story. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
The earthquake that struck Turkey and Syria is one of the biggest natural disasters in our times. Now is the time to explore all possible avenues to get aid and personnel into all affected areas. We must put people first.
The earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, they have led to the collapse of thousands of buildings in Gaziantep, one of 10 Turkish cities impacted. More than 900 of the 6,400 buildings in that city were destroyed in the quake. Authorities say that the quakes damaged countless more buildings, leaving hundreds of thousands of people homeless in the middle of winter. Turkey officially does have building codes to deal with earthquakes, but the extent of damage from these quakes has raised questions about how well those standards had been enforced. Well, for more now, I'm joined by Dr. Kit Miyamoto, the global CEO of Miyamoto International, currently in Istanbul, Turkey. It's good to have you on the program. You yourself, you're a structural engineer. You describe yourself as a disaster risk reduction and response expert. So let me put it to you. What should be the first priority right now on the ground in Turkey and in northern Syria?
They're doing the right thing, search and rescue. I mean, research tells us that first 10 minutes, that's where the most people actually die, by the way. But there are also, after weeks, you're still going to find people too. So it's a search and rescue is the most important criteria right now to save lives. That's where it's at.
And we are looking at just vast amounts of damage. I mean, as far as the eye can see. I mean, how long are you expecting rescuers then to be able to pull out people alive?
Well, usually the search and rescue operation lasts somewhere between 3 to 4 weeks. But also the search and rescue do not stop till actually the last body is counted. You know, that's what they try to do. And those people actually put their lives at the risk because it's a real fragile state, or that you can see debris and building leaning toward it. Mm-hmm. And it's a keep moving. There's aftershocks throughout. So they're actually they are definitely doing the best they can to get to the people.
I think some of the most disturbing images are all of these buildings that we're seeing, just countless multi-story buildings that have basically just collapsed straight down like a stack of pancakes. Yeah. How is it possible then for people to survive that type of cataclysmic collapse?
Well, I mean, I met this lady. She's a hotel owner in Haiti back in 2010. She was buried underneath of a 7-story hotel building, and her baby died, but she survived through for about almost 7 days or so, and rescue that team reached to her miraculously. So there's always like an air gap happens certain cases, and that's actually a miracle, by the way, but it does happen. So we just kind of give up right now.
And there are these air pockets, and I guess there's only a certain amount of oxygen that's in these pockets, and then it depends on how many people are in that pocket who need that oxygen, right? And then it's a battle against the clock, right?
Well, there's enough air coming in and out because there's enough gaps and debris and stuff like that. So it's not like a concealed anything like that. But the problem is that no water, obviously. And if they're injured, it's obviously that's going to be hard. Yeah. And also cold weather right now. So that makes extremely risky condition, you know. It's a bad condition. But I think they're doing the best they can right now, as far as I can see. But, as you mentioned about buildings, Turkish building code changed in 1997. Yeah. So that's 1997, the seismic code kicked in. So if you see damage patterns, you see the distinctly difference. The older buildings collapse more than new ones. So that's where the things happen there.
Do you see anything, though, that tells you that the building codes, particularly since 1999, that building codes have not been enforced? Do you see buildings that collapse completely that should not have collapsed?
Well, of course, obviously building code is good as how the contractors and masons and laborers, they implement, on the field. So you can have a best engineer in the whole world, but if the contractor don't do the right job, still death. So therefore, there's inspection and quality control and things like that. It's really critical. I think that particular department, it's definitely in the holds in many, many parts of the world.
Dr. Kit Miyamoto, the global CEO of Miyamoto International, joining us tonight from Istanbul, Turkey. Dr. Miyamoto, we appreciate your time, valuable insights too. Unfortunately, we meet on such terrible circumstances, but the insight is valuable. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Well, the day is almost done. The conversation, it continues online. You'll find us on Twitter, either at DW News. You can follow me on Twitter at Brent Goff TV. And remember, whatever happens between now and then, tomorrow is another day. We'll see you then, everybody.
Out of your diet. There's more to fat than BMI. You can't run away from those calories. The truth about fat has been stretched thin, so it's time to adapt a new perspective. What really helps excess weight?
In good shape.